he's going to sort of set up this scenario that we're going to kind of roll into a little bit of a panel discussion. So Monica and Joan and I and anyone else, this is a dialogue, but we're just going to sort of be up here sort of thinking and working through this problem. But Mike saw an interesting veg response that we thought would be kind of a cool panel discussion. So take it away, Mike. He's going to give us a 10, 15-minute background on this, and then we'll kind of spend the rest of the 10, 15 minutes after that kind of just throwing around some ideas. And a lot of this has to do with a lot of the questions we talked today already about scale and scale and site prep. Thanks, Mike.
Sure. All right. Well, thanks for having me. It's a great topic. I've done a lot of work with rare plants, and if y'all know rare plants, some of their last populations are in mowed areas, on roadsides and right-of-ways. And so, I figured I'd talk about that. So to start off with, just real quick, I just want to remind everybody that we have this opportunity to work with, to provide funding for the conservation of federally listed plants and at-risk species in Florida. We get a certain amount of money every year. It's kind of an annually funded opportunity for federally listed plant conservation. But we have a website with a lot of the research, the titles of the publications. You can go to a managed area and see what kind of research has been done on that managed area or by institution on our website, by the county, whatever you want, just to see what our reports relate to. But we have, most of our projects are $10,000 to $20,000 a year. It comes from the Endangered Species Act. So we'd like to help conserve. We're doing work out here with the Conradina glebe right here at Torreo State Park currently right now. So with just this quick presentation, this is a 15-minute presentation. We'll look at just the fuel reduction techniques, and just some pictures, and then the panel discussion like Brian was talking about. So we'll go into the fuel reduction techniques. The fuel reduction, it's as you guys have probably seen, you just get this great response after mowing. And those fuel reductions can be mowing or hand removal, chainsawing out, hack and squirt kind of fuel reduction. Gives them that sunlight that causes a lot of germination or resprouting from the underground parts. And you just get this great response. So what we're going to be talking about here are the mowing and the hand removal of fuels. So what do you use to do it? You got your bush hogs, brown tree cutters, large mowers, gyro trackers. Is there any other kind of mowers that people use to do fuel reduction? I know the roller drums and stuff like that you do is another one, but this is mostly above the soil. This is non-soil disturbing kind of mowing is what we're going to cover here. Is there any other kind of mowing that people do besides these right here? I like the bush hog and the brown tree cutter. That there's less disturbance and you get a really good response. Gyro track leaves a lot of mulch, as you guys know, and sometimes the plants can't come back through that mulch. Just like it's been talked about here a lot, every site's different. So I just want to remind people that this wet site mowing is great, if you can get in there and not cause a lot of rutting and stuff like that. Pitcher plant bogs, if you can get in there and mow and not cause a lot of disturbance and mow over that, they just get a great response from that. These wet prairies, seepage slopes, edges of depression marshes. A lot of these depression marshes are, really build up in palmetto and all kinds of other plants, and you can give wildlife a little more access to those depression marshes through there, and you get a great response from native plants as you're doing that. But just to remind you that you can have that wet site mowing or dry site mowing. All of this occurs on right-of-ways too, Department of Transportation right-of-ways. And so we'll go on to the next one. But when you're doing this, you're taking out all these things that have been talked about here today. on the wet sites, dry site mowing. You know, the wet site mowing, it's interesting. You can get away, sometimes you can get away with less of it because there's not many nutrients there. So when you do a mow, it leaves the area open enough to let those plants go. But sometimes it requires annual mowing, or even more than that, 2 or 3 times a year, to keep the understory down so much as to give the native orchids and pitcher plants and things like that enough sunlight to grow. But the dry site mowing, sometimes the mesic flatwoods, as we know, that's a lot of mowing you got to do to keep the fuels down and stuff. But in the scrub, like right around here at Tate's Hill, we have a lot of coastal scrub, and a little bit of scrub of mowing goes a long way. You know, it can last 4 or 5 years, and you have that nice open removal of the scrub oaks and everything, and that lasts for like 4 or 5 years at that site, and you get these great rare species there. But sometimes it takes more than that if there's different species there. It depends on the site. But it sounds like you guys do a lot of this kind of large scale restoration, mowing, you know, fuel reduction, knocking down palmettos and taking out scrub oaks and things like that. That's the first place I go when I'm looking for rare species on a site. If I hear that a place has been logged, or if there's restoration, that's where I go, because that's where the species are, as many of you know. And you know, when you're doing this, I would see if you could, if I just make a suggestion, and it's talked about here earlier today, before planting, maybe mow a few times in there, especially on the fire breaks, near the fire breaks, to keep the, you know, to keep those fuels down for safety and for fire danger, reduces fire danger, but it also just enhances that herbaceous community. It's so good for the rare plants and gopher tortoises and things like that, the more you mow. So if you're doing a restoration, keep it mowed, you know, along those fire lines, 40, 50, 100, go as far as you want, and mow it as often as it needs. It's hard to make a generalization how much you need, but if you could do that, that's great for the rare plants and the rare animals too, and for fire danger. So, you know, that kind of goes along with the edges of the roads and fire breaks. These are the last places with the rare plant species that I work with. These are some of the last populations on these areas that are mowed. Everywhere else around them is just fire suppressed. So, you know, you can, what I do in my job now is I remove native or invasive plants and heavy fuels from around rare plant populations. And you know, you can spend an hour or two around a rare plant population just doing it with a pair of loppers or a chainsaw and quadruple the size of that population just with 4 hours of work. It's extremely effective. You know, you can hack and squirt one big tie and open up half of a pitcher plant bog. You know, it doesn't take very long. So, yeah, and mowing, sometimes you need to do that as prep. If you are going to mow a large area and you think you might have rare plant populations, sometimes it's good to remove the fuels up from the rare plants just to minimize any kind of danger there might be with mowing those plants. But usually they're fine, you know, they get burned over. They have underground parts, you know, that they are good with. And and during drought, you know, this hand removal, this small scale fuel removal, if you can't burn an area for sometimes 10 years, you know, as a lot of folks know in this room for sure, you can have 10 years of just bad fire weather. And so just getting out there and hand removing the fuels from those really hot spots of where your rare species are is it's very needed. And it reduces fire. You know, when you mow and you do all this, it just makes burning easier. It makes it more safer. So it works all the way around. And, you know, if there's one thing I came here to say is, you know, when you are having these fire breaks, you might want to just consider mowing as far into the interior as you can, just as a normal part of your plan of burning, for making it better for fire and for the rare species that it benefits. But of course you open it up to invasive plants when you do that, you know, when you disturb soil. So you've got to be careful with that. These are considerations that you need. There are some things out here in this particular area. You might want to survey for Arkansas oak if you're doing restoration of sand hills and clay hills. It's a tricky one. They kind of like fire, but they kind of don't. So you can always, you know, flag them. But they've been known to take a pretty hard hit from people not even really knowing they're out there. But the Arkansas oak is around in this area that you can find to help conserve it. So time of year for mowing. There's a lot of these plants in Florida. I think everybody in here knows this probably better than I do, but you know, to deal with the fire, they profusely flower and fruit in the fall. So all winter there's all that food for wildlife, you know, in those areas. So it's a good thing to kind of leave that and mimic the fire, the burn regime that we have naturally, you know, that mimics fire, because that is good cover and good food to leave out there all winter for wildlife. But now another thing that's good is doing test areas, because we talked about so much today about how each site's different. So you might not want to do a big, huge, large-scale thing. You might want to start off with 10, 15 acres. It's especially true down south on the ridge, on Lake Wales Ridge. There's different ways of doing scrub restoration. But the test areas are always good. And if you are going to start this kind of effort, just make sure that you follow it up with fire or mowing soon, because you can make it a million times worse. Mowing an area to help the rare plants, and then never coming back, it could get way worse, because all that resprouting of the scrubs. So, I mean of the shrubs. So that's a huge consideration. So I'll hurry up here. So when you cut plants in these small scale removal, you just have to find a place to put them. You know, you can put them on things that you want to kill with fire, you know, saw palmettos and things like that. Careful of poison sumac. But, so just some things, I'm just going to fly through these. This is one area. Now this area we hacked and squirted a bunch of sand live oaks, and we have so many rare species there that you have to go out and you got to remove those dead and dying sand live oaks off the top of gopher and sand skinks and rare plants and stuff like that. So that's the kind of fuel reduction we do out there, because there was just hundreds and hundreds of these things removed. But this is more local. Here in Apalachicola, this is McBridea alba, and it really only lives on the roadsides here at Tate's Hill, but there's one interior area. You can see what kind of a response you get when you just come in here. You just a small scale hand removal of the tie and the gallberry and stuff, which you can see in the background. But look at that great response just from doing that a little bit. These are your right-of-ways, you know, and you know, this is an adjacent seepage slope. This is all seepage slope. There's an adjacent seepage slope there that looks like this without, and all your rare plants are just down in there. They may be gone or whatever, but a little bit of hand removal or fire, and then you get this kind of, and it opens up and you get that great response. It's way better for wildlife and fire danger and all that kind of stuff too. So, but we do a lot of small scale reduction in this area here. And but yeah, you get that wall of tie, and it's less species and it's hotter. The fires are much hotter. So right out here at Tate's Hill, they did herbiciding and mowing, and they first clear cut the sand pines out. You can see what it looks like, the sand pines behind it. But they had this great ground cover response. Look at these. You know, well, they've already planted the area, but they put down some herbicide too, and I think that at first, that was one of the first places I looked for rare species, and there's tons of these rare scrub plants, coastal scrub plants. It's a very rare habitat. Think about it, coastal scrub is just really rare here in the Panhandle. But this is scrubby flatwoods, actually. Sorry, I'm mistaken. This site right here is scrubby flatwoods, so you get more longleaf and more palmetto and stuff like that. But look at this response. That's all Conradina, you know, the native false rosemary. But you just get these great responses, and this is what Brian was talking about. We wanted to look at this. This is right next to the headquarters. The park at the headquarters at Tate's Hill. You can just walk around and see it. It's right around that general area. But it's a great response from the ground cover, and you get gopher tortoises out there that I don't think I ever saw them out there before. But you know, this is pollinators. You know, they're all migrating towards this particular area in October, so it's a great thing to have them. When they migrate down to the south here, to have all of these herbaceous plants ready to help them. You know, this is the rare blazing star that's down there. Good wildlife food with Galactia. Amazing. This is just a huge response from that species there. Great for turkeys, and as you guys know. So I'm just going to conclude with that and go into the panel discussion.
So we've got maybe 10 minutes here, and what I wanted to kind of throw around was when Mike, so I'll back up for a second. ARSA and NIFWIF helped pay for some of that restoration there at Tate's Hill, and when Mike sent around those great pictures of that veg response, there was a little bit of an email conversation of, well, aren't a lot of those scrub species, and we just planted all this longleaf out there, what does that say? And I think that the interesting conversation to have is, as land managers and as people who are trying to grow this longleaf ecosystem, how do we build in some of that sort of site accuracy? And I think it gets back, Joan, to your comment about how great does it need to be? Like how good do we have to aim for it to be good enough? So if scrub, you know, if the restoration of this property involved removing a bunch of sandpine, and we come to find out it was actually a sandpine scrub, and we just got rid of all the sandpine and planted longleaf, what does one do about that? You know, do we start, because you get into a scale problem, right? I mean, if this site, let's say, is predominantly, like you said, scrubby flatwoods where longleaf should be, but there are occasional ridges that have sandpine scrub on them, do we have a way at scale to do that work that is accurate and honest to that historical habitat? Or is it just good enough to say, look, we've got hundreds of potential longleaf acres here, we're not going to worry about which portions of it are scrub and which portions of it are scrubby flatwoods, and we're just going to plant a bunch of longleaf everywhere and we'll let it sort itself out. But with sandpine and longleaf, that's tough because they burn differently.
Well, we had a similar, and we're on the East Coast, we had a similar situation on the property we manage. We have a dune system. From the coast, we have a dune system, and we have the coastal strand, which dominates, you know, just after the dune, and then we get into a maritime hammock. But I think they've been, prior to me getting there, they've been managing that as a coastal shrub past where it's coastal scrub. Mm-hmm. And they were mowing, they were burning, and when you go in there and look at you have small hickories, you have things that are not coastal strand,
right,
but are maritime hammock. So I think what happens is, you know, I think we overmanage sometimes for what we want versus what it's supposed to be. And I think an area like this that maybe has been cleared and all this stuff has come back, it's going to come back what it's supposed to be. And I think maybe overmanagement sometimes, or you know, the human error of overthinking, or what we want it to be, or what we need it to be, right, or what we think we need it to be, is what happens. Versus we see this coming back beautifully, and maybe we should just let it come back to what it's supposed to be.
Right. But if we've changed the species that's ultimately going to be the canopy in that case, right, is the plan then to just let some sandpine regenerate in here and sort of let it sort itself out with the longleaf however it wants, which is, maybe that's one approach?
I'm not sure, but I would imagine, I don't think they'll probably be doing any removal of the sandpine. Maybe just let fire. I think they will be burning it.
Right.
So that may help.
Yeah, that maybe fire that dictate what it's
Sort
gonna
of
be.
filter it,
Yeah.
right. And one point that you made, Mike, is that, we get into some really rare habitats here.
It's really
Where, even rarer than longleaf, how do we balance those semi-conflicting future conditions where we've got a really rare sand pine habitat nested inside a fairly rare longleaf habitat? And we still are trying to do these things efficiently at scale. And, I don't know whether it's realistic for land managers to start thinking about projects that do incorporate some of that sensitivity, so we know where to send the logging company. And that brings up a whole other issue of how to effectively, get rid of off-site pine in a site that, isn't, can we treat these whole blocks uniformly, or can we build in some of that historical accuracy?
I think it's up to land manager to collect as much information about the historical situation. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of resources. You got, aerials going back to 1940, right there to your computer. You've got, Ravines. You can look at old, survey data. And,
Right.
Surveyors are really good at X number of chains. They record what tree species are around. So a lot of the information is out there. You just gotta dig.
Right. Were you guys surprised by any of the species that came up? And what they might say about what this wants to be or used to be?
Kinda, I don't know if anyone was looking for it. I was certainly looking at this area because it is a hot spot. Because before this, all the rare plants are on the roadsides. So, you look at rare plant points and they're all along the roads, well, everywhere else is sand pine, but now it's going to be more naturally distributed because it came from the seed bank or somewhere, but there's rare plants all through that whole area. It must have come by wind or seed bank or whatever, or underground, but but that was a good response. I don't know if anybody was looking for that.
I want to make a comment about the land surveys. If you're talking about the chain, there's an issue with that because how they classify their species was common names. Common names have changed because short-leaf pine can be two different pines depending on who you're talking to. So that's the issue with that. But I agree that you need to research as much as you can with soil surveys that can help. The narrow photos sometimes don't because depending on the land management, this is all longleaf, they've been harvesting it. Well, they're harvesting in a historic hammock, but they can grow trees there, so they went into the hammock.
Right.
So you just gotta be conscious of what it is, because we have issues on one of our management areas that has a lot of cabbage palm. Historically, cabbage palm wasn't there, and we're trying to figure out what to do with it. And I looked at the surveys and it was a lot wetter than they've changed the hydrology so much. Cabbage palm, once it gets above a certain height, fire doesn't keep it in check. Saltwater intrusion would keep it in check. And now there's no saltwater intrusion, so we got to decide how we're gonna manage this. Is it actually a new habitat, or what do we do with it?
Right.
And then you have crested terracotta that might use those cabbage palms, so now you can't manipulate it because now you have another threatened species that just came in on top of what you just.
Yeah, we have, that issue is really big with pasture lands, with sandhill cranes and other things, is they love pastures, but pasture is not a natural habitat for it. So what do you do?
Yeah.
So you gotta weigh your options and what's your ultimate goal for that area.
I'm curious how many land managers do use like aerial photographs and soil data and things like that to help sort of define where you're going. I'm seeing a lot of head nodding, so that sounds good. Well, and I think there's surprises sometimes out there. That's sort of what this brought up for me was sort of the idea, like, oh man. And how would you right the ship if that's something that you wanted to do? I don't know that there's a good answer because you start running into scale problems pretty quickly.
For the long term, it's going to be how you manage it. If you think it's more scrubby, you're going to manage it differently.
Right.
Does it take fire?
Which is weird in a blended system like that. The longleaf might seemingly require a lot more fire than the sand pine scrubby would.
Yeah, but in the long run, if it is supposed to be scrubby, the fire is going to sort it out because that fire will hit it and not burn through it, or it'll be patchy, so you're going to have the scrub come back to what it's supposed to be.
Right. The fuels are just a chunk. So I guess real quickly, two sort of gratuitous plugs that are right along the same lines. There is going to be a climate smart adaptation training that's coming up in Live Oak. I think registration is closing up soon. Joe and I went to it last year, and it was good. It was like lots of case studies on how to think about land management and build in some of the predicted sea level rise and climate change and things like that, so that we're not simply thinking about it from the context of what was historically there, but also thinking about what's going to be resilient as things start to change. So that's a good training, and there's an email going around with a link to sign up for it. If anyone's interested, jot down your number or your email and we can send that around. And then also, specifically to this, our next ARSA meeting is going to be here at Tate's Hell on November 16th. So those of you that work in the ARSA region, please plan on coming. We're going to dive in on this and go see the site and a couple other sites over at RWIA. So hope to see you there. And I think that just about wraps up our classroom portion, unless anyone's got any